Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're located. So let's get started with this session. Today's topic is implementing data analytics in an enterprise using Power BI and Azure. So in short, it's not just about Power BI, it's also about what analytics options we have available on Azure. So it's a combination of both, basically. So if you're a pure data analyst and you usually just use Power BI, then you can look into Azure side of things as well, and maybe suggest to your organization if you're not already using some of the techniques that I'll mention in this particular session. You can ask your maybe data engineers, etc., to configure things, or maybe if you're a data engineer by yourself, you can do so by yourself. So this way you will be able to support data analytics in an enterprise. So basically, it's a large scale data analytics. That will be the main focus of this particular webinar. So overall, we will talk about what exactly data analytics is, what are the various report designing options offered by Microsoft, when to use what tool, what are the various data source or data sources, what options do we have, when to use what data source. So at times you will just be okay with simple CSV or Excel spreadsheets, but in advanced cases, you will have to look into more advanced data sources. Then we will talk about big data, Azure Synapse, what are the various report sharing or distribution options, and how you can utilize Azure Purview as a data cataloging solution. So there are various options covered here. So like I mentioned, it's a bit of Power BI and a bit of Azure. It's a combination of both, basically. So at times, you need to know the bigger picture at an enterprise level, what we should be using. Do you have to use all of these? Not really. It depends on the requirements, something we will cover slowly and gradually in this webinar. So let's start off with what is data analytics before we start seeing Power BI and Azure oriented options. So overall, data analytics is the science of analyzing raw data. So usually we'll have raw data to begin with, like your data entry systems would just insert, update, delete data in your data sources. And then you have to make sure you make that raw data more beneficial. So make sure that you come to some conclusion. So convert it to information, or in fact, convert information to knowledge. So decision making will happen based on the knowledge that you have based on your raw data. And overall, we want to ensure that our corporate or enterprise benefits from the data, like reduce the cost, increase the revenue. And we want to make sure that overall, we shouldn't be required to write too much code. So with relatively less code or no code, we should be able to implement data analytics in an enterprise. So here you will notice that some options are no code options. You don't have to write any code whatsoever. Whereas in other cases, you will have to write some sort of code as well. Like Azure Synapse asks you to write SQL queries or Synapse SQL to be more precise. So definitely you will have a mix of no code, low code, or in other advanced cases, you will have to write more code in even Python as well. Okay, so data analytics can be of different types. So we can have descriptive type of data analytics, which usually means what has happened. And on the extreme end, we have prescriptive, which means how we can make things happen. So before I cover these in slightly more detail, so usually we want to go from information to knowledge. So we want to get insight into our data. So we have hindsight and foresight. So looking at what you have available to you and also make things happen. Try to find out where we can improve things. So do some root cause analysis, make a better decision basically. So we can get some foresight. Prediction can be done as well. So when you want to go from information to knowledge, you will end up using various visuals. So Power BI, which is something we will talk about in just a bit, it lets you use several visuals. And some of the visuals, they are descriptive type of visuals. They let you find out what has happened, like just look at your actual data. So you can have tables, matrix, and similar visuals. It will just let you look at your data, what has happened. And then to diagnose things, why something happened. You'll want to you'll end up using some other visuals such as decomposition tree. So we have various visuals, so they let you do different things. They let you answer different questions. So why something happened? And then likewise, we have predictive, what will happen. So what if type of scenarios can be implemented as well. You can predict like where you can make improvements in your sales area. So how you can improve your sales. So in what region there's room for improvement, in what branch office, in what retail store there's room for improvement. So you can predict things as well. So typically we end up using a line chart. We can do some forecasting projection. And you can also get some prescriptions. For that, we end up using various other visuals such as key influencers and so on. So for now, just know that when you analyze data, you need to have some business goal in mind, what exactly you want to accomplish. So based on that, you will end up using various visuals. So here we will talk about Power BI along with some other options, and you will notice that they let you do these types of data analysis. And overall, regardless of what tools you use, you will end up going through this data analytics process where you have to, first of all, connect to some data source like Excel, CSV, SQL Server, or some more enterprise scenarios can be utilized as well. Then you usually have to clean up data, uh, refine it, shape it, transform it, add additional columns if they are missing, remove the unnecessary columns, so shape your data. And then as part of data modeling, you usually end up creating relationship between tables. You have to standardize your data model. So what data is available to you for the reporting purpose? Make sure that it is well modeled. It's refined. Everything is top-notch before you start visualizing data. Then you get to visualize data. And then once you have your visuals on your report, you can analyze data. You can interact with your report. So interacting with the report will let you analyze data, like use drill down, drill through sort of options, display more useful tooltips on your report. So there are basically several interactive visuals available in Power BI that you can use to analyze data. And then you'll end up sharing data with the rest of the users so that they can make decisions and look at your data and so on. So overall, this is the process that we usually follow when we have to analyze data. And this is the bigger picture. So the bigger picture basically involves enterprise data analytics as well. So there's lots of stuff going on here, something we have to cover in this webinar slowly and gradually. So in enterprise scenarios, you will end up making lots of decisions, like what data sources we should use, what tools we should use, what should be the data flow, from where data should be retrieved, where it should be stored. So it all depends on your business requirements, and this is what we will discuss in this webinar, slowly and gradually. So when you have to analyze data, you need to architect it first. Someone needs to architect it for the whole enterprise. So we are not going to act as just a simple data analyst here who's just going to focus on just your immediate need. We need to look at the whole corporate, the entire organization, basically. So we need to pick the right tools. We need to pick the right data sources. We need to pick the right data flow. So let's break down this diagram into smaller bits and pieces. Let's start off with reporting tools. So a data analyst, what tools a data analyst should use. So as far as Microsoft is concerned, there are various options available. Here we are not going to talk about the third-party options such as Tableau, Crystal Reports, etc. We will only focus on the Microsoft-based toolset. So if you want to analyze data, Microsoft lets you analyze data by using Power BI Desktop, Power BI Report Builder, and you can also choose to utilize the Visual Studio Report Designer. So there are overall 3 tools available when it comes to analyzing data. So first of all, let's talk about what tool is appropriate for you. Do you need to use all of these 3, or just one or the other is more than sufficient? So you have to ask this question. So what type of reports do you want to create? So what's the meaning of what type of reports? Let's discuss that one step at a time. So Power BI Desktop, which is definitely very commonly utilized by lots of organizations these days, overall, it's a very useful tool, a tool that lets you create interactive reports with ease. So it's perhaps the easiest tool as far as Microsoft data analytics sort of portfolio is concerned. This is the simplest possible tool. So it's a very easy to use tool that lets you design interactive reports, and it's a DIY, do-it-yourself sort of tool. So back in the day, we had to ask the IT department to help us out with setting up our data warehouses, like cubes, OLAP cubes, etc. Then we had to connect to those from Excel or any other reporting tool. But these days, you actually don't really have to ask the IT department to set up things for you that much. You can do things by yourself. You can bring data into your report. You can clean up data. You can modify the data at the report level. You can do data modeling at the report level. So it's a DIY, do-it-yourself type of tool that lets you do pretty much everything just at the report level by yourself. So definitely it's a very useful tool. So if you don't want to involve the IT department, you want to analyze data by yourself, then definitely this is the right fit. And you don't want to write any complicated code. So code-wise, at best, you'll just have to write DAX queries, data and analysis expressions. So it's basically a very low code or almost no code type of technology that lets you analyze data. Its shortcomings. So number one, you're limited to exporting your report just to PDF and the PowerPoint presentation format. So if you say that, no, we need to export a report to maybe Excel workbook, maybe you want to export it to images, various image formats, or MS Word type of format, then no, this is not the right tool. So this is a more interactive reporting tool. You use it to design dashboards down the road. So overall, it's meant to act as an interactive decision-making tool. But if you want to export data to other file formats, Excel, etc., no, this is not the right tool. Even printing-wise, it's a limited tool. Like whatever you're seeing on the screen, this is all you will be able to print. So if you have, let's say, hundreds of thousands of records in some table, no, it will not print all the records. It will only print what you're viewing on the screen. So maybe you're viewing just this part of the screen, and maybe this bottom section is getting cut off because of scrolling requirement. So you can only print what you're seeing on the screen. So it's a limited tool, basically, as far as export and print options are concerned. So if you have to make a decision at the corporate level, what tools we should use, we have to be aware of the pros and cons. Next, we have Power BI Report Builder, which has been available almost since forever, like at least since the year 2005 or so. So basically, as part of reporting services, so 2005, 2008, 2008 R2, there were various versions of reporting services. So ever since then, we have had access to Report Builder. So Report Builder, you can choose to install it on your machine. It's free of cost, standalone tool. It's a very simple download, install it in just a matter of few minutes. Or if you are a hardcore developer, if you have, let's say, Visual Studio installed on your machine, then you can choose to use Visual Studio Report Designer, which back in the day was called BIDS, Business Intelligence Development Studio, and the newer name for that is SQL Server Data Tools. It's also known as Visual Studio Report Designer. As a developer, you can use this tool. If you are not a developer, you want a simple tool that you can install, you can use Report Builder. When should we use Report Builder? So when you have paginated reports requirement, your pages and you have several pages in your report. Like maybe think in terms of the traditional reports, maybe invoices, any details type of data that detailed data that you want to display as tables that could span literally hundreds of thousands of rows, or when you print the report, it might span maybe hundreds of pages. So whenever you have the printing requirement, you want to maybe export your report to various file formats, such as Excel, even PDF, docx, MS Word format. So when you want to export your report to various file formats, that's where this can be a very useful tool. So when you export your report, it does retain the drill down features. You can still expand, collapse your records. So it supports drill down. So it's basically a very traditional type of reporting tool, such as Crystal Reports. If you have ever encountered it or heard of it, it's very much like that type of tool. So Report Builder will be useful when you want to create paginated reports. But if your requirement is to have a DIY, do it yourself, data cleansing, transformation, shaping type of tool, you want to clean up data, shape data, do some data modeling by yourself, then it's somewhat limited. Here you have to rely on SQL queries. So if you're not aware of how to write SQL queries, it can be somewhat challenging too. So you need to learn a bit of SQL syntax before you'll be able to use this tool. So there's more steep learning curve in this case compared to Power BI Desktop. And interaction-wise, it's less interactive compared to Power BI Desktop. So basically, at the enterprise level, if we have to architect things, how data analytics should be done at the corporate level, what tools we should recommend to our employees, what tool we should use by ourselves, we need to know the pros and cons of these tools. So in short, tools-wise, we have discussed that. Let me actually come back to this slide. There we have discussed that end user, or let's say report designers, if they want to use some tool, we should know what tools are available, what options are available to us, and then pick the right tool. Next, we need to know how to connect to different data sources, what options we have available to us, what options we should use in simple scenarios, what options to use in more enterprise complicated scenarios. So data sources wise, let's talk about this thing. So data sources wise, it depends on the requirement. So who is analyzing the data and what data is being analyzed? So data analytics wise, when you have already decided what tool to use, next you have to pick your data source or data sources. So maybe you have data in your CSV text files, maybe in your Excel workbook, or maybe you have data in SQL Server, Oracle. So it could be in any of the relational databases or some text file, etc. Or in more enterprise scenarios, you will end up having other options such as Dynamics 365. You will have data verse, you will have data flows, Azure Synapse, you will have multidimensional databases. So this is what we have to discuss in slightly more detail, like when to use these options. But for simple ad hoc day-to-day type of data analytics, you can use CSV, Excel, SQL Server, Oracle type of data sources. But enterprise solutions, they involve multi-dimensional databases or tabular data model by using SQL Server analysis services. We have data boards, we have Power BI dataset / data flow, we have Azure Synapse as well. We even have more data sources, like you can use HD Insight on Azure, Hadoop Insight. You can use, let's say, Databricks as well. So we definitely have lots of options. On non-Azure scenario type of scenarios, in non-Azure scenarios, you can use Redshift. You can use Snowflake. So definitely we have several third-party options available as well. But here we will just limit ourselves to some of the options provided by Microsoft as part of Azure. So that will be our main goal. So here we have to first of all understand what's the meaning of enterprise solution. So what is the difference between simple and enterprise? So simple basically means just one data analytics person will be considered here. So what is feasible for you? So what do you think is the easiest way you can use to analyze some simple data that is available just to you maybe? So if you want to analyze some ad hoc data that's available to you, go ahead, you can connect to that data set from Power BI and get done with it. But if you want some common data that should be available to all of your employees in an enterprise, then in an enterprise, when you want to make sure that everyone should have access to some common data, that's where you need to look into these options. So architects, they need to know what are the pros and cons of these options and then implement them at the organization level. And as a data analyst, we just need to know that someone made a decision at the corporate level to have one of these or maybe all of these, and we just need to know how to connect to it using Power BI. But say if you are responsible for suggesting to the organization what options we should use to implement enterprise analytics, then we need to know these options. So when to use what option, that is what we have to cover here. So let's discuss these one step at a time. So it all depends on questions. So even if you don't memorize any of the other stuff, the most important thing is the factors to consider when picking, let's say, a data source. So what factors we should consider? So ask yourself this question. Do you plan to implement data analytics only in your on-premises environment? Are you restricted? Are you limited to uploading content to cloud or having you're storing content on cloud? So can you choose to have any cloud components at all? If you say no, this is one of the very important factors. If you're allowed to use cloud, then you have more options available to you. So in just a bit, I'll compare the pros and cons or the factors of each technique in just a bit. For now, just know that these are the factors we have to consider when we have to pick any data source. On-prem versus cloud. Cost. How much budget do you have? How much data do you have? What's the size of your data? Is it just a few megabytes or hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes, terabytes or petabytes? So let's say large financial organizations, they easily have several hundred terabytes or even petabyte of data at times. So when we have to process such insane amount of data, we need to know when to use what resource or what data source. Also technical skill set. So who's going to use it? What's their technical skill set? So we have to pick the data source accordingly. And also, if it's meant to be used by a very small team of users, or it's going to be enterprise, which will be used by, let's say, pretty much the whole organization. So these are the factors we need to keep in mind when we pick some data source. So usually in the interactive actual classes, we usually go through exercises. We usually go through Q&A sort of session. We ask people to come up with what are the important factors for them. But definitely in this limited 1 hour webinar, I'll just give you a quick overview of some of these. Okay, so let's start off with something called multi-dimensional database. It's also known as cubes, OLAP cubes. And in fact, it's also called tabular data model. So it has two variations basically. So overall, we can say we have analysis services, which offers us two different flavors to create enterprise data sources or use the enterprise data sources. So if you say that we are only allowed to do data analytics in the on-prem environment, we are never allowed to connect to any cloud environment at all, then in that case, multi-dimensional databases /cube/TDM, this will be the right fit. So this is the on-prem type of data warehouse that you create at the corporate level, and any number of users can start connecting to it and analyze data. So you can create a centralized sort of a data model that will be available to all of your users, data analytics, and they can analyze data. So this is the on-prem option. It's relatively easy to learn compared to other options. And you can definitely connect to it from Power BI. In fact, if you know Power BI, how to use a bit of data modeling, how to use query editor, how to use some DAX formulas, then definitely this will be the easiest way to implement an enterprise data model at the corporate level. This is the easiest on-prem option. So think of it as a Power BI desktop equivalent option where you do not have any visualization because it's going to act as a data model. So it will act as a data model, and then any user using Power BI desktop or even a report builder, etc., can connect to this particular environment or this cube type of data. So this way, any number of users can connect to this central multi-dimensional database and analyze data. So this is the on-prem option. All the remaining options are cloud-based options. So if you say that we are allowed to use cloud-based components, we are okay hosting data online on, let's say, Microsoft servers, you can utilize these other options. So you'll see several terms like data words, data flow, data set, synapse, and usually there's a confusion when to use what option. We just need to know what factors are applicable in what scenario, and based on that, we have to pick the right data source. So if I quickly go back to that diagram before I continue with the explanation, basically the goal is that we have already decided what tool or tools to use, and now we need to connect to our data source or data sources. So in simple scenarios, you could connect to CSV, Excel, SQL Server, Oracle. But in enterprise scenarios, you'll say, I want to make sure that we have some consistent data model available to all the users. So you'll end up using multi-dimensional databases or cubes or TDM if we have on-prem scenario, on-premises scenario. So this is the enterprise on-prem sort of scenario where you're allowed to use just the on-premises servers, not the cloud portions. But if you're allowed to use cloud portions as well. So now we have to decide whether we want to use data boards, data sets, data flows, or Azure Synapse. And like I mentioned, there are actually more options like Snowflake. We have Redshift, We have HD Insight. So definitely there are several other options, but in short, they're all cloud-based options. So when should we use data boards, etc.? Let's talk about that. Okay, so data boards, you might actually already be using it. If you have Dynamics 365, if anyone uses Dynamics 365, or if your organization uses Dynamics 365, you're essentially using data boards. So data boards is basically cloud-based database. So the easiest way to understand it is think of it as MS Access, Microsoft Access sort of database that works on cloud. So it's a cloud-hosted database provided by Microsoft as part of Dynamics 365. Even Power Platform lets you use this Dataverse database where you can create tables, etc. And formally, it used to be known as CDS or Common Data Service, but now it has been renamed to Dataverse. So Dataverse, simply put, is an online cloud-hosted database offered by Microsoft. You can use it as part of Dynamics 365. You can use it as part of Power Platform, where you can create Power Apps that can insert, update, delete data in your Dataverse. You can also think of it as a SQL Server sort of database that works on cloud, and it's very easy. So unlike SQL Server, this one is very easy. It's also flexible. Like you can still create relationship between tables and also implement or add data validation rules as well. And you can do it with almost no code whatsoever. In very advanced cases, you just have to use simple Excel typed sort of expressions or formulas. So overall, it's a very simple syntax that you can use to create, set up your database on cloud. So again, if you already have Dynamics 365, or maybe if you're using Power Platform, like Power Apps, etc., you most likely already have Dataverse available to you. If no, you can think about it. No, maybe we don't want to use it. But if you do have Dynamics 365 Power Platform, you most likely already have it. And it supports between 2 GB to 4 terabyte of data, depending on the subscription level, how much you're paying to Microsoft. So basically, as an architect, a data analytics type of architect, or even as a data analyst, you can suggest to your corporate, oh, we are already using Dynamics 365. We didn't know that it already has a database and we can connect to it. Or we are already using Power Platform. So let's use the same database to store pretty much everything, and we can analyze it. So Dataverse is one of the enterprise options, cloud-based options. We also have Power BI Dataset, which is available as part of Power BI Service Pro subscription. It lets you store up to 4 GB of data. And what exactly this Power BI service, or sorry, Power BI Dataset means is, so when you use this tool called Power BI Desktop, so this tool lets you create reports. You get to connect to various data sources, which I'll do in just a bit. Once you're done with your report designing, you'll be able to publish the report. So in fact, let me just quickly connect to one of my data sources here. So I can, let's say, connect to something we will talk about in just a bit. It's called Synapse. So let's say I search for Synapse here, or even before that, you can search for, let's say, Dataverse. So if you have Dynamics 365, you can use Dataverse here. Even without Dynamics 365, you have Dataverse as part of Power Platform. They can search for, let's say, something else here, like I'll use, let's say, Synapse for now. I'll talk about Synapse in just a bit. I'll just enter my server name here, OK it out. It will show me the databases that I have access to. So let's say I'll use this demo database. I have COVID-19 data here. I'll load it into my report. So you can create your report by connecting to different data sources like SQL Server, CSV, Excel, Synapse, Dataverse, etc. And we have this simple table in our Synapse database. I can quickly plot it as, let's say, a map. So here we have COVID-19 data displayed as part of this map visual. So once you are done with this particular report, you can start consuming it or let other users consume it. And even if you don't add any visuals here, we just have this particular fields pane showing us some table or tables from some data source. So you can choose to model things here. Like you can add more columns, you can rename columns. So typically we cover that in more detailed courses, but you can, generally speaking, go to this edit query, open up Power Query Editor. You can choose to add more columns, remove columns, uh, transform data. Let's say I'll just convert text to uppercase in this case. So we are doing everything at the report level. So you're able to transform things at the report level. So anyone can create or import data into a report and also do data modeling as well. So data modeling wise, you can add more columns, remove columns. You can also see that we can choose to create a relationship with other tables. If you have multiple tables, you can add a relationship between tables. So someone can just create this fields pane, organize the fields pane without any visuals whatsoever, and then just save it. So save wise, we use published, save. I won't bother doing the whole thing here because it will take a bit of time. But generally speaking, once you have saved it and you click the publish option, this will get published as a data set. If I draw the conceptual diagram here, so Power BI service will be available. You need to have a subscription or an account for that. And then any person who's trying to create let's say just the data model can use Power BI desktop. And then even though we don't have any visuals at all, you can choose to just publish it as it is. So on Power BI service, the cloud platform, it will be available as data set. I'll point it out in just a bit practically as well. So basically, any person can do data modeling in Power BI desktop and publish the report as it is. What's the point of having a report with no visual whatsoever? So the point is that now other users, so there can be more users here, and they can utilize the exact same data set from their Power BI desktop tool. So other people can consume this data model. So if we have Power BI service available to you at the corporate level, this is one of the easiest ways you can use to share your data model with other users. So maybe one person is good at doing data modeling. Other people are not so good at data modeling. They just want to visualize data. So you can basically choose to just model things by yourself. So one technical person or somewhat semi-technical person can do this thing, upload it or publish it to Power BI service, and everyone else can connect to the same data set from Power BI desktop, and they can consume this. Let me just save it as a diagram here. Okay, so in short, you can choose to use this data set option. So publish it once, consume it as often as you want. So in Power BI desktop, you'll notice that we have the option to utilize Dataverse, like I pointed out previously. We also have the option to utilize Power BI data sets as well. So basically, the same report that you usually create here, and doesn't matter whether you have visuals or no visuals, you can publish it, and other people can consume the same modeled data or data model by using this Power BI datasets option. The Power BI dataset, in short, if you have Power BI service available to you, you can choose to consider this option as an enterprise option. So it lets you store up to 4 GB of data in each data model. If this is good enough data size for you, awesome. If you have Power BI service for you, then definitely you can go with this route. and just let other report designers connect to it by using Power BI Desktop. We also have something called data flows, which is available again as part of Power BI service, but this time around you need to have a more expensive license or subscription. So budget, cost, like I mentioned, it's a very important factor. So if you're okay with this premium subscription, which costs more compared to the Pro, or actually a lot more compared to the Pro. So if you have the budget, you can say that, okay, let's increase the capacity of our data models. So from 4 GB, you'll be able to bump it up to 10 GB almost, and you'll be able to use this particular concept, which is known as data flow. So data flow wise in Power BI Desktop, you will notice that we have this data flow option available as well. We can see that we have data sets, which is available as part of the Pro license. It requires sort of a low cost subscription, but data flows requires more cost. And data flows, definitely they can be somewhat more advanced, like you can choose to configure your automated refresh, how frequently you want to refresh data. You can connect to different data sources at the scheduled time intervals and update your data models automatically. So it does contain some more advanced bells and whistles. So do you want to have periodic data refresh involved? If yes, it can be a very handy way of doing things. Otherwise, if you're using this Power BI dataset, it does let you refresh data, but for that you have to configure the data gateway option, and then you have to configure the scheduled refresh at the gateway level. So in short, there are different factors. What's the size of your data set? How much budget do you have available? So based on that, we have to pick and choose the right data source. Now let's talk about some Azure side of things as well. So if you say that 4 GB, 10 GB, no, we have much more than that data available to us. So there are corporates who would literally have hundreds of gigabytes or even terabytes, hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of worth of data. Even if you don't have insane amount of data, you can still consider using big data option or options. So big data usually means several things. So typically volume will be pretty huge. So one of the V's is volume. And it doesn't always have to be huge. It could be as small as just a few hundred megabytes database, or several terabytes or hundreds of terabytes or petabytes worth of data could be there as well. So volume definitely can be small or large. It could be either way. But the main factor here will be velocity, performance, super fast performance when it comes to analyzing data. So you want to make sure that if there are literally tens of thousands of users connecting to the same data set at the same time, performance should be good. And also, if at times you'll have variety of data where some of the data could be in your CSV files, Excel spreadsheets, SQL Server databases, and so on and so forth. So you want to be able to connect to different data sources, or variety of data could be there. So big data usually means 3 V's. So performance is the main thing we want to handle here. We want to make sure that if they are, let's say, DBAs, database administrators, or data engineers. So the more modern role is data engineers, like BI developers, etc. So they can ingest data. They can connect to different data sources, like CSV, Excel, SQL Server, Oracle, etc. And they can load data into this particular data warehouse, which is actually also known as data lakehouse in case of cloud-based solutions. And data analysts would be there, and they will want to consume this data at a super fast pace, performance basically. So you want to make sure performance is top-notch. So that's where you can consider using this enterprise option offered by Microsoft called Synapse, Azure Synapse. So Azure Synapse is not a low code option. It does require code. So mostly you have to write code in Synapse SQL format, which is quite similar to SQL queries. And it also offers Python-based code as well. So you can choose to write code in Python as well if you're good at it. So have a pick. You can use SQL query-based syntax or Python-based syntax. So this will basically act as your central data warehouse, or the more modern name for that is data lakehouse. The data lake storage is basically utilized under the hood by this Azure Synapse technology. So what we do is we protect our data analytics sort of users. The data analysts, rather than saying that memorize every possible data source, we have 15 databases, we have 32 Excel workbooks, we have hundreds of CSV files. Now be aware of every possible location and every possible data source. It will be a mess. So what we can do is we can simplify things. So data engineers can simplify things at the corporate level by making this central type of data warehouse or data lakehouse. And they will end up implementing pipelines here. They will ingest data. So data will be available here at the data Synapse level. So now it's a single database kind of thing. And end user here would mean that we have report designers. So report designers will use the same Power BI desktop tool and connect to the single Azure Synapse database. Without knowing how many CSVs we have, can anyone remind me again? How many Excel workbooks we have? No, you don't need to know any of that stuff at all. You're able to connect to this single Azure Synapse database, and you will have access to everything. So if I show you this a bit practically here, in my case, I have this Azure Synapse environment, and you can see that I have, let's say, maybe even this one is okay, or let's see if we have some more options here. Okay, so let's say we have this one. So you can see that we have this Azure Synapse environment. It's showing us this database. And you can choose to literally import data into this data warehouse or data lakehouse. Or in advanced cases, you can also use external tables concept, where you keep data in your underlying data sources like CSV, Excel, etc., and you just create external tables. So this COVID-19 is available as a table here. We can see columns here, but in reality, it's actually a CSV file. So in my case, I'm actually keeping data in my underlying CSV file. You're able to map CSV, Excel workbooks, data, and SQL Server, Oracle, other data sources can be linked to this particular database as external tables. Every table here is an external table, which means the data resides somewhere else. But here we want to provide just a single streamlined database name to the user, to the report designer, so that they will find it very easy when it comes to connecting to the database. So they won't have to memorize what's the database server name, what are the credentials for each data source. They don't need to know that stuff at all. So basically, we are able to protect data analysts from all of these tens of, maybe dozens of data sources by not forcing them to memorize the locations, but by letting them connect to just this single database. It also improves security as well, because now no one needs to know each and every location. They just need to know a single location. So you're able to configure security at this level. So Synapse, in more advanced cases, it also lets you implement machine learning, where you can look at the data patterns and come up with some predictions, forecasting, etc. So there's basically machine learning capabilities built into Azure Synapse as well. So moving forward in advanced cases, if you do have the requirement to use this machine learning concept, Azure Synapse can be very awesome. So it's a big data type of database or data warehouse or data lakehouse that lets you connect to different other data sources. and you can analyze data with relative ease at a super fast pace from Power BI desktop. So basically, this is the overall goal of or concept of Synapse. So big data, that's your main goal, and it does require setting up of the Synapse environment. So you do need to know how to set it up. You need to know how to use Synapse SQL. In more advanced cases, you need to use Python, especially when you have to use some advanced machine learning options. So it does require setting up of this Synapse component first. So if you have data engineers, they can set it up for you. If you are a data engineer, you need to know how to set this up. Before your data analysts will benefit from this particular Synapse, you need to set it up. So use it when you have big data requirement, volume, velocity, variety of data sources is required at the corporate level. So definitely it's a very awesome enterprise solution if you think you have variety of data sources and you have the requirement to sort of protect or secure these data sources from your data analysts by not letting every user directly connect to each data source. But if you say that, no, this one looks good, but no, it's a bit too advanced, maybe we don't want to use this thing. In that case, you can definitely choose to ignore this part, and you can instead look at, let me show you this option first. So I'm going to skip a few slides so I can cover something that's directly relevant to this concept, and it's called Azure Purview. So Azure Purview, before I cover the slides for this one, let me just quickly go back to the original slide where we have the summarized bigger picture of this whole presentation. Okay, Purview, Azure Purview. Azure Purview, basically it's like a directory. It's like a telephone directory. What exactly is contained in Purview? Your data sources. So at the corporate level, at times you'll have literally dozens or maybe even hundreds of data sources. You will have several CSV files, several Excel workbooks, you'll have several SQL Server, Oracle. You might even have some online, you might have some in your on-prem environment, you might have some in AWS, you might have some sitting in maybe your vendor's website or maybe your trading partner's website, let's say environment. So you could have literally tens of dozens of, or let's say several dozens of let's say data sources. So if we have so many data sources, how do we let our data analysts find out what data source we are supposed to consume? How do we search for the data source? So all the data analysts that we have here, how will they know exactly what data sources we have access to? What's the purpose of each data source? So basically, you'll want to have sort of a search type of website, very much like Google type of search engine should be there that should let you search for the data sources you plan to utilize. So Purview, simply put, let me go back to that slide again. So Azure Purview, simply put, it's nothing but just a data catalog. So behind the scenes, it makes use of something called Apache Atlas. It's basically a bunch of APIs, and it lets you search for different data sources that you already have at the corporate level. So this is typically configured first, and then it can be consumed by anyone. So data engineers, data analysts, pretty much anyone can consume it. And before I talk about risk and compliance, let's look at some more details here. And since we don't have enough time left, so I'll just explain the important stuff. So overall, you will notice that it's basically a portal. It's available as part of Azure, and you'll be able to configure your search engine. You'll be able to search for, let's say you can type in sales data, annual report, annual data, annual sales data. So you can type in any phrase here, and you will have certain keywords hooked up to different data sources. So before you benefit from the search engine, you have to do a bit of homework. So as part of this Azure Purview, you need to configure every possible data source that you have at work, like how many CSVs you have, how many SQL database servers you have, what Excel workbooks you have. So you need to register everything here in this Azure Purview portal. And you can organize these in the form of collections. So this way you can say that maybe the sales area has a bunch of data sources, inventory has a bunch of data sources, and so on and so forth. You can create collections. And once you have these collections, you can even configure keywords or sort of aliases. You can even look at your map as well. It will let you know that in this collection, we have these data sources. So you can see we have Teradata, we have Hive, etc. So it can be any type of data source or data sources can be registered here as part of each collection. And you can look at the entire map basically. And as part of each data source, you can configure keywords, etc., like I mentioned previously, and you'll be able to use the search engine. And in fact, it also has some compliance and sort of rules and regulations sort of system built into it as well that you can configure. And you can say that, show me all the tables where we have some uh, sort of strict or secure columns available. For example, maybe credit card. So basically, by default, this Azure Purview classification is basically the actual term. So there's classification concept available here. It classifies the columns like credit card, email address. So it's aware of all the uh, uh, common conventions, like the security sort of compliance requirements, like what columns are supposed to be secured, like social insurance number or SSN sort of numbers. So it knows that. It will let you know whether some table can or some collection contains any of these columns or not. And if it contains any of these columns, the good thing is that you can configure data masking just at the purview level. You can configure data masking, and whatever columns will eventually be retrieved from any data source, it will get masked. It will not show you, let's say, the full credit card number. It will probably just, let's say, show you the last 4 digits. So you'll have, let's say, XXXX dash blah blah blah, and then you will have, let's say, the last 4 digits, and you can configure that. Same goes for email address as well. You can say you want to mask your email addresses, or even address, etc. Should be masked as well. So basically, you can classify columns and configure the masking pattern for that without doing anything at the original data source level. So your CSV, Excel spreadsheet, SQL Server database will be untouched. And just at this purview catalog level, you're saying that if it contains a column with this type of data, it should be masked when any data analyst requests for that data. So overall, this purview has two main benefits, like I pointed out previously. It acts as a catalog, so you can search for the relevant data sources with ease. And secondly, risk and compliance. So you can basically have your data masked. You can also configure security. Who should have access to what data source? So from a central location, you can configure who has access to what. So basically, Purview is offered by Azure. So if you think you will have lots of data sources, you have the requirement to mask data, you want to configure security at a central level, at the corporate level, then definitely this Purview can be awesome as well. So in short, enterprise analytics-wise, we need to be aware of some of these concepts. So depending on the volume that you have for your data, depending on how much cost you have, the variety of data sources you have, do you have the requirement for cataloging things? Do you have the requirement to implement risk and compliance, etc.? We need to know these enterprise options. Okay, so basically in this webinar, we discussed some of the enterprise options. And definitely, we do have detailed courses available. So if you just have interest in Power BI, nothing else at all, then PL300 is a very useful course. But if you have the requirement for all of the enterprise options we covered in this 1 hour webinar, like Purview, Azure Synapse, etc., We have this DP500, talks about enterprise scale data analytics using Microsoft Azure and Power BI. In fact, this DP500 also talks about some advanced Power BI options as well. For example, you can use calculation groups. You can use some additional tools such as DAX Studio, Tablet Studio. So they let you design your DAX expressions in a more sort of advanced manner. So DP500 talks about some of this stuff as well. And if you have, let's say, managers, or you just want a high-level overview type of code, we have WA2992. It's basically this Power BI sort of for managers, which just talks at a very high level, like it's a one-day course. It talks about just the high-level process that we use for Power BI and so on. So we do offer detailed courses. Like I mentioned, we have this one. It's a one-day course. This is a 3-day Power BI specific course, and this one is a 4-day course that talks about the enterprise level techniques as well, which is basically recommended only if we have the PL300 type of prerequisites met. Okay, so any question regarding this session? And we do have the phone numbers, email addresses listed here. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to get in touch with us. Okay, so thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here with you for this session.